Winter Maiden. If you wish to know more of Muirland, we must start at the beginning when time was new. The king was called Winter after the time of his birth, although the name also matched his white hair, ice-blue eyes, and the freezing storms that swept over him and shook the very ground when he was angry. The Winter King was clever as well as powerful. He bent the wild new magic of the world to his will and defeated all other men who wanted to rule. He had 4 children, the spring, summer and autumn princes, and a daughter known only as the Maiden. The sons were raised to be warriors, while the daughter was taught to be good and kind and to care for all living creatures. While the sons practiced with sword and bow, the daughter spent her days in the forests with the creatures she loved, learning about nature. Muirland was a peaceful place, for the king ruled well, but his sons grew restless. What use is a warrior when there's no one to fight? The Winter King didn't notice their discontent, for he found nothing amiss in the world. He loved his country and wanted to always be king, so when he grew old he used magic to prolong his life. The princes grew more impatient still. They were warriors with no one to fight, and when their father's strength refused to wane, they saw their chance to become kings slipping away. Maiden spent more time in the forest to keep out of the men's arguments. The 3 princes agreed they'd share power and not make their father choose a single heir. Then they went to him and urged him to step down so they might take his place. The Winter King laughed and said they could rule the land when he was dead and cold. When they persisted, he grew angry and drove them from the castle. The sons did what they'd been trained to do. They created an army filled with young men who hungered to set the old staid men aside so they might take charge. A mighty battle took place between the 2 sides. The princes fought well, but they lacked the experience of their father, and he vanquished their army. In his fury that his own sons could turn on him, the Winter King called on magic once more. The season of his birth and his name became the only season Muirland experienced. Plants and animals went to sleep as the temperature fell, the sun retreated, and snow blanketed the land. As time passed and the cold remained as unrelenting as the king who controlled it, the people began to protest. The princes discussed whether they had the strength to battle the king once more. It was then that their sister, Maiden, brought a message from the forest. She spoke on behalf of the animals and the plants of the earth. She knew the damage permanent winter was doing, and she wanted to return balance to the land she loved. "Let me talk to him," Maiden offered. "I'm sure I can persuade him to relent." 2 of her brothers laughed, but the 3rd understood more of tactics beyond brute force. "You're right, sister," Prince Summer said. "A woman's pleas may work where our men's force has failed. I'm sure our father will listen to you." He gave his sister a small vial. "And in case he doesn't listen, take this sleeping draught. Pour it into his wine. While he sleeps, we'll take him captive and force him to give up his magic." "I won't drug my father," Maiden protested. "I'm sure he'll see sense." Summer curled his sister's fingers around the vial. "Nevertheless, take it, in case he won't be guided by you." Maiden met his gaze steadily. "You won't harm him?" He laughed at the idea. "Of course not. He may be our enemy, but he's still our father. He'll be our prisoner, treated with honour." She agreed to do as they wished. Changing out of her forest homespun, Maiden dressed in her most ornate finery for the meeting, as befit the daughter of a king. Swathed in a white fur cloak that allowed her to blend in with the winter landscape, Maiden made her way to her father's castle. The Winter King greeted her with joy, for he'd been a loving father until his son's rebellion, and he missed his children. Maiden threw herself at her father's feet and begged him to release the magic that held the land in its fearsome grip. She told him of the animals that were starving because winter did not end, of the plants that couldn't grow because the ground was too hard for seeds to push their tender shoots to the surface. The Winter King grew angry. Children shouldn't gainsay their fathers, and she knew nothing of ruling, nor of battle. The Winter King told her he'd relent when he judged the time to be right. Maiden bowed her head. "Forgive me, father. I saw suffering and I wished to relieve it." He raised her to her feet with a kindly smile. "You're a good girl. I'm not truly angry with you, Maiden. Come, we'll eat together before you return to your brothers. You'll tell them to prostrate themselves at my feet to beg for my mercy. Then perhaps I'll relent." Maiden agreed, but her heart was heavy. She knew the princes were too proud to do so. She would have to use the sleeping draught against her father. She slipped the potion into his wine as Prince Summer had instructed. The king was a big, strong man, but finally the potion drew him into sleep. When he was slumbering soundly, head on the table beside his plate, Maiden slipped from the castle to tell her brothers their prisoner awaited them. Spring grinned. "Now we'll finally take our turn." The three brothers pushed their way into the palace, shouting orders to the servants. Summer patted the Maiden's shoulder. "Well done, sister. I knew you were on our side." Maiden's heart misgave, for she hadn't thought herself on the side of anyone, save the good of the land. She returned to the dining hall to find her father barely breathing. She realized her brother hadn't given her a draught for sleep, but one for death. She sat beside her father and held his hand until his breath ceased altogether and his mighty heart stilled. Then she went to the window and looked out. With the loss of his life, the Winter King lost his grip on magic. As Maiden watched, the snow rolled back, fading into spring's thaw. She was sad for her father's death, but pleased that nature was returning to balance. With the Winter King vanquished, his sons, Spring, Summer and Autumn, took his throne and ruled in turn. In this way, plenty returned to the kingdom. Oftentimes, that's when the story ends, but any fool can see that's not a satisfactory account of matters. The natural world didn't rearrange itself from 4 seasons to 3, despite the defeat of the Winter King. The snow still appears each year. So read on for the ending that mothers whisper to their daughters when the men of Muirland have finished their tale. Maiden felt her brother's betrayal keenly. They'd lied and used her, and she knew they wouldn't be satisfied with their father's defeat. When she tried to leave the dining hall, she found the doors were barred, sealing her in. In a moment she understood her brothers would allow no one to interfere with their rule. Tearing her fine cloak into strips, Maiden quickly worked a rope, which she lowered out of the window to make her escape. She fled to the forest and watched as 100 men surrounded the Winter King's castle with flaming torches and burned the place to the ground, the dead king inside. Maiden's anger burned higher than the flames. She'd helped her brothers seize power, and in return they would have killed her. She couldn't trust her own family. But she had another place to call home. Maiden remained in the forest while Spring took the throne. The snow that had cloaked the ground melted, green shoots appeared, and animals woke from hibernation. The princes worked in harmony at first. After a few months, Summer took the throne. The days grew long and hot while crops ripened in the fields. Then Autumn had his rule, enabling people to harvest what they'd grown as the leaves fell from the trees and mists hid the hedgerows. Now should come winter, but the brothers had killed the Winter King. Maiden wondered how they'd bring winter about without their father's magic. But autumn was replaced immediately by spring, green shoots bursting forth even before the last of the brown leaves had fallen to the ground. The princes had what they wanted, but Maiden knew balance hadn't returned. Nature was exhausted. Everything needs to sleep. Maiden saw that life was no better now her brothers were in charge than it had been when their father had refused to surrender power. She walked to their palace to reason with the 3 princes. They were surprised and wary to see her, since they thought she'd perished in the fire. Autumn, who currently held the throne, laughed and told her she was a silly girl who understood nothing of politics and power. "The country is more productive like this," he told her. Summer chimed in. "People can work more hours when the days are long. And the harvests come more often," Autumn added. "We've transformed the land, and everyone benefits." "Nature can't sleep," she pointed out. "Animals need to hibernate, and the ground needs to rest." Her brothers laughed. "Rest? They can rest when they're dead. Life is better this way. But come, we're pleased to see you returned, little sister. Let us feast." Maiden held her tongue. Servants brought fine dishes, and they all sat down. She lifted her eyes to Autumn at the head of the table. "May I say a prayer in thanks of what we have?" The princes, who didn't worship any god save magic, shrugged. "If you please." Maiden closed her eyes, but it wasn't a prayer of thanks that she gave. She requested help, and the magic that dwelled in everything in the natural world heard her and responded. The power that had belonged to her father grew in Maiden, his worthy heir. She took on the role of winter. Moving around the table, she poured wine for all of her brothers, whispering what they assumed to be a blessing before she handed over each cup. They drank deeply, and the Winter Maiden waited. Quiet and cold slipped over the room as one by one the brothers fell asleep. Autumn sprawled from his throne to slumber on the floor. Spring and Summer dozed beside the table. Winter stepped over the prone figures until she reached the throne, taking her rightful place with a smile. At last, the snow fell, creatures settled in their nests for the winter, and humans stayed longer in their homes, gathering by the fire and telling stories to each other while snow fell gently outside. When it was time for Spring to take the throne, Winter slipped from the palace to allow her brothers to take their turns. But when Autumn had ruled for long enough, she returned and let loose the magic of winter, as she has done every year since. That was The Winter Maiden by Katy Haye. Thanks for listening.